Welcome to the Be Real podcast with Bobby Maximus, Joe Cebula, and today we are going to teach you 3 tips to increase your bench press. Now, every single guy that I've ever met, Joe, wants a bigger bench press. And when you meet some of the other dads, you meet a new friend, you're talking to a fellow gym goer, the first question out of their mouth is how much you bench. So you better make sure that number is as big as possible. And so we're going to get into it right away with 3 easy tips to get a new 1 rep max on that bench press.
Let's
Tip
do it.
number
Here we
1,
go.
Joe, you got to lift heavy.
You have to. There's no getting around it. Like, lifting heavy is a skill, and you need to be good at that skill, which means you're going to have to get a lot of reps that are heavy. It's very different. Lifting an empty barbell versus a really, really heavy barbell is a different skill set. So you have to actually spend time doing the thing that you want to get good at. I know it comes as a shock, but you need practice.
Yeah. Now, let's talk about what heavy is, though, because heavy can be a relative term.
Yeah, absolutely.
When we're talking heavy, and we're going to be a little more sciencey this episode of the podcast than normal, but we need to be. We're talking about your 1 rep max or something close to it. You can't go into the gym and just do sets of 20 with 135, sets of 10 with 185, sets of 8 with 205. You're going to have to start doing singles, doubles, triples, and even sets of 4. Now, Joe, there's this chart. There's a guy named A.S. Prilipin. He's a famous sports scientist, and he put out this strength chart. He mined the logs of thousands of world, European, and national and Olympic weightlifting champions.
Well, just as a side note, most of the Russian, science coaches, the guys that they hired to coach their teams, were more trained in statistics than they were in coaching methodology. Yes. So when this guy breaks down his numbers, this is coming from a guy who is very, very good at understanding statistical analysis.
Yes. Now, if you want to look this chart up, just Google A.S. Prilipin strength chart, and then you can kind of get all the background for this. But what he did is he compiled all these logs of these thousands of weightlifters, and he came up with the best rep and set ranges and weight ranges, if you will, to get strong, to actually put on real raw strength. Now, running concurrently to this, there's a guy named Mel Siff who wrote a book called Super Training. And he talks about the percentages you need to lift as well and the rep ranges you need to stay in to get strong. Now, we could probably talk about these charts for hours and hours and hours, but we don't really need to, Joe, because whether you follow the West Side Barbell methodology, you're going right to the book Super Training, you got your little A.S. Prilipin chart, like all of the workouts that have been born out of this, they're essentially the same. As long as you're lifting heavy, keeping it low rep and getting enough rest between sets to facilitate big lifts, you're probably going to be okay.
Yeah, and the Prilipin's chart in particular was written for like really, really well-established weightlifters who've been at it for years and years, and so their 1 rep maxes were like true. For the average gym goer, your 1 rep max probably isn't a true max. Yeah. Not without all the experience, the background that being a professional weightlifter would give you. So everything is kind of like within a window anyway. And so it's like you might be on the low end of the window or the high end of the next window down. Like, as long as you're kind of in the range, it's going to be effective. And so the specific numbers, like I see programs that are like, you must lift 75.2%. Like, this is too specific for somebody who's, whether or not they got a good night's sleep is going to swing their percentages 5 points either way.
And it also depends, Joe, like when you're talking about these guys would also have a competition 1 rep max. They have a training 1 rep max. They'd have a 1 rep max on all kinds of different lifts. But without going down those rabbit holes, because we like to simplify stuff here, we're going to give you 4 simple workouts that you can use to get stronger. So the first thing you need to do, you have to get that 1 rep max number. And like you said, Joe, it's a kind of 1 rep max or a T 1 rep max or a theoretical 1 rep max, because it's probably not going to be 100% accurate unless you're a world-class powerlifter, right? But we want you to work up to a 1 rep max and test your single lift, the most you can lift for one rep. And how I would do that, Joe, I would go to the gym, I'd throw 95 pounds on the barbell, I'd do a set of 3. I put 115 on, I'd do a set of 3. I put 135 on, I'd do a set of 3. Just keep jumping by 20 or 30 pounds every time and doing 3. And when it starts getting heavy, then reduce it to singles. Then do one.
I take a similar approach. You might do like a set of 10, a set of 5, a little heavier, set of 3, a little heavier. But by the time I get to like a 4th warm-up set, I like to be at about like 90%, like pretty dang heavy. But at that point, you're just doing singles. And then you can kind of work up to the point where you feel like you might fail. That's a number. Like you've got a number now, you're close enough. And there's another little trick you can use. It's not super accurate, but using a 1 rep max calculator. You can just Google that, and it's a little chart, and you put in like, I did 135 for 3 reps, and it will give you a calculated number, and it's at least enough to get started with.
And it's close enough for the purposes of training. Like if you have that number, then you could do these workouts and you're going to get stronger. The thing that I'd like to add, whether you use my warm-up, like I do a lot of triples. Joe does the 10, 5, 3, 1 thing. Like it honestly doesn't really matter. It's probably personal preference. The deal is if the weight's really light, you can make a bigger jump when you go up to the next lift. And by really light, I mean if it's easy for you. If it's a struggle, you might only want to add 5 or 10 pounds, right? And where your chart comes in, Joe, the 1 rep max predictors, that's really useful if you don't have a spot. Because it is really scary to get pinned. It is really scary to fail a lift and have nobody there. So if you don't have a spot, then use this calculator. So here we are, we got a 1 rep max, and say, Joe, your 1 rep max is, we're gonna call it 300 pounds. You tested yourself, you got a 300 pound bench. We're just gonna stick with that. Well, there's 4 workouts you can do to help increase your raw strength. The first one, 5 sets of 3 at 80% of your 1 rep max. So how's this gonna work? You're gonna put 300 pounds into a calculator, you're gonna times it by 0.8, it's going to spit out 240 pounds, and your workout of the day is going to be 5 sets of 3 at 80%, 240 pounds. The next one, 6 sets of 2 at 85%. A little heavier, less reps. The next one,
255 at 85%.
4 sets of 4 at 80% 1 rep max. Now, this is similar to the 5 sets of 3, but there's a lot more time under tension. And I'll tell you, a 4x4 is a lot harder than a 5x3 because you're closer to failure every single set. So this one actually pushes the workout a little bit more into what I'll call the strength endurance category. And how I would choose these workouts, if I was looking to get stronger without getting bigger or putting on a bunch of weight, Joe, I'd stick with the lower reps, like the 1s or the 2s or the 3s. If I'm looking to put on size and strength, I'm looking at 4 or 5 or 6 reps or something like that. And then the final one, it's the classic CrossFit workout, 5 heavy singles. 90% of your 1 rep max, 5 heavy singles is that at that to get you used to pushing big weight. I would do one of these workouts every time I bench press. So if you're on the classic 90%, 270, right?
Yep.
So if you're on the classic bodybuilding split, Joe, you're doing chest Monday, back Tuesday, legs Wednesday, like whatever. Every Monday you go to do chest, you start the workout with one of these 5 sets of 3, 4 sets of 4, 6 sets of 2, 5 sets of 1, and then you move on. And I guarantee you, you do that for 6 weeks, you will get a new PR in the bench press. You'll increase your 1 rep max.
Yeah, and there's an interesting risk versus reward element to some of these too. Like the 5x3, I would consider pretty safe and effective strength training. Doing the heavy singles at the higher percentage, like at 90% of your 1 rep max, if something goes awry, it's going to go awry a lot worse than if you're only at 80%. And so the heavier you get, sort of the higher the risk, but also the higher the reward. Because like I said before, lifting heavy is a skill. And so if you're getting good at lifting 270, then lifting 305 or 310 or 315 is going to be easier. So there is a little bit higher of a reward, but you just have to balance that out. And again, everything kind of falls in these windows. As long as you're sort of close enough, it's going to be effective. So you also have to decide, are you a competitive power lifter where your money rides on whether or not you get 1 pound more than the other guy? Or are you just training for health and for longevity and you want that strength number, in which case you might choose on the lower end of the risk scale and just take your time with it. Either one will get you there. It's just a matter of how long it's going to take.
And the truth is, Joe, all of these workouts, that chart that we referenced earlier from AS Prilipin, just to give you a background of the chart number, citing this by memory, so it might be a little off. But basically what he does is he gives you a 1 rep max percentage range. So if you're going to lift between 80 and 89% of your 1 rep max, he wants you to get between 2 and 4 reps per set. And he wants you to hit 10 to 15 total reps in the day. As long as you're following all those rules, you're good. So the way I explain this at seminars is pick a number between 80 and 89. And you say, I want 83. Why 83? I have no idea, but you picked 83%, Joe, so you're going to go 83% of your 1 rep max. Pick a number between 10 and 20. You're like, I want to do 15. Okay, how many sets do you want to do? I want to do 6, okay? 6 sets of 2 gets us to 12. 6 sets of 3 gets us to 18. As long as it's in that 10 to 20 range and you're doing 2, 3, or 4 reps per set, you are fine. So they're really not going to be that much different at the end of the day anyway. You hear nerds argue till they're blue in the face about this. Well, one's more strength than endurance. One's more strength. One's more blah, blah, blah. If you're watching this and you're a recreational weightlifter, like you're not entering and winning powerlifting tournaments or powerlifting meets, it probably doesn't matter. You could do 5 sets of 3 every Monday for 6 weeks and it would probably have the same effect as doing 6 sets of 1. Like, let's be real. And especially, and this is the last thing we'll say before moving on, if you're the guy who's watching this with a 185-pound bench press. If you have a 600-pound bench press, it probably matters which workout you choose.
Yeah.
If you're at 225, you're at a $185, you're at 275, even 300, Joe, is not that great of a bench. It probably doesn't matter. But the key is lift heavy every time you work your chest.
Yes. And I think the next point that we're going into is even more important than just the sets and reps that you're choosing for lifting. And that's choosing the right accessory exercises. Like, we need a bigger, stronger structure. And so we've got to be able to identify, like, where in that chain of movement, where in that kinetic chain am I the weakest? Where is the low-hanging fruit that I can chase? And 90% of the time, it's triceps.
How would you identify that?
So when you're lifting, especially when you're lifting heavy, you pay attention to where the struggle is. You know, if you're failing right off the chest, it could be an upper back issue, it could be a chest issue, but if you're failing your bench right at lockout, it's probably triceps. And that's where I see most people failing their lifts, especially early on in their lifting career.
So, Joe, let's speed through this a little bit. I don't want to make it complicated. For your accessories, you're going to do 3 sets of 10 to 3 sets of 12. We'll make it super simple.
It's a kind of classic bodybuilding.
Yep. Give me 3 exercises that you could do for triceps that are going to help you.
We could do dips. Dips are great. Get a lot of chest in there, but also a lot of triceps. I like skull crushers.
Okay.
Tricep push downs are really good. In a pinch, push-ups.
Yeah. Tricep kickbacks. Like, just don't make it complicated. Here's the rule. Don't make it complicated. Pick 3 exercises that target your triceps and switch them up. Don't always do the same thing. Every single Monday you go into the gym, you know, try to cycle through these things. So the triceps are 1. Number 2, Joe, I'm going to throw this in here, the lats. If you notice bar fade, if you can't control the bar, and by bar fade, I mean you can't keep it in a straight path. It's fading towards your face, or you're losing control of it at the bottom, like you're bailing on it, I would want to do more dedicated lat work. A lot of people don't realize it's not just a push. You stabilize the bar with your lats. So I would do more lat work. And for lat work, Joe, I mean pull-ups, lat pull-downs, seated cable rows, single arm rows, like pick something, again, 3 sets of 10, 3 sets of 12 to, you know,
burn them out. We're chasing a pump here. We're burning them out. And that's what's going to make them a little bigger, a little thicker, a little stronger. And then you go test that bench again and you see what's changed.
Yeah. And then you got the third. You might need some stronger shoulders. The shoulders do play a role in your bench press. So do some side laterals, do some front laterals, do some rear delts, do some upright rows, do some shrugs, like just build some stronger shoulders.
That's a great segue into our last tip here, which is not to neglect your overhead pressing either.
Yes.
So we got to get that overhead strength. And you said it to me earlier today. If you can overhead press 225, you can definitely bench 225.
The way I teach people, Joe, is what you can overhead, you can always bench press. What you can bench press, you probably can't do on an overhead. So if you had to pick only one of these exercises to do, I actually favor the overhead press with a barbell or overhead press with the dumbbells, because if you get strong enough at that movement, I promise you whatever you could do on that, you can do on a bench press. And conversely, sometimes throwing something like an incline bench or a decline bench is good too, because it changes the range of motion. But to sum this up and wrap it up, we want to get in the habit of doing these quick podcasts where you could just get the information you need. You can get out of here and you can go get strong. Number one, you're going to do one of these strength workouts. Here's your 3 tips. Write these down. You're going to do one of these strength workouts every time you work your chest. 5 sets of 3 at 80% of your 1 rep max. 6 sets of 2 at 85%. 4 sets of 4 at 80. 5 sets of 1 at 90. That's how you're going to start your chest workout. Then you're going to do 3 sets of 10 of a tricep accessory. Pick one. Skull crushers, JM press, tricep push downs, dips, push-ups, which will bring the chest into it too again, but there's nothing wrong with that. Pick something, 3 sets of 10 for the lats, a pull down, a pull up, a row, or whatever. And then 3 sets of 10 is something dedicated towards the shoulders, the side laterals, the front laterals, rear delts, shrugs, like whatever you want to do. And then on another day of the week, don't neglect your overhead strength. And it's funny, Joe, and we'll wrap up with this, the overhead workout can look just like the bench press workout, but with different exercises. Like these workouts will apply to your deadlift, to your squat, to your overhead press, and it's literally that simple. Try it for 6 weeks. I promise you, you will increase your 1 rep max, and probably by a lot. I've seen people do this and put 30 pounds on their bench, Joe.
Oh, yeah. For real. And I think, again, it's a skill, and we're getting lots of practice. We're getting comfortable pushing ourselves. We're getting comfortable with those weights, those accessory. Like, it takes time for muscles to grow and cells to divide, but as they do, where you were failing before is not where you're going to fail the next time. So you just get more and more comfortable, more and more competent. The numbers can jump incredibly.
Done. 3 easy ways to increase your bench press. Now go get yourself some.